Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Rockwood part number 70C-606. So the 70C is their typical, common, ubiquitous push plate. The 70C, the 70 is going to tell us the fact that it is a Rockwood push plate. But tells us more information than just that. The 70 is like a series. There's a link below this video to the product brochure where we can pull up the 70 series of plates, and that's specifically going to tell us that our material thickness is 50 thousandths of an inch. Rockwood can do thicker plates as well. They also have the ability to do this in .125, substantially thicker than a 50 thousandths plate. Which is going to be maybe about 16 gauge or so. Let's take a look. 50 thousandths. No, it'll be closer to 18 gauge is what it would is in brass. 18 gauge is what it would be. So they can do a 1/8 of an inch thick as well, which is 11 gauge. That would be a substantial piece of equipment. That would be certainly something that you would see in very high volume, high use applications, public projects that will have an outrageous quantity of volume through the opening will very likely have a thicker plate as well. But when it comes to everything else, yeah, the 70 or the 50 thousandths is going to be the typical plate that you are going to see. Now, speaking of C, the C in the part number is a reference to the size. The C means that this is 4-inch wide and 16-inch tall. Okay, probably the most common size for a push plate. 3.5, 15 is not unusual, and probably the second most common. And then you get into your 6x16. Occasionally the 8x16 or even the 4x20. We'll see the same plate just about 4 inches longer. First, a word on the width. I like a little wider plate. I mean, even my average size hand isn't completely on the plate when I'm going to push the door open. So you're going to always see on your push plate, you know, some sort of degradation to the finish that will be on your wood door, or over time, you know, a breaking down of the paint on your steel door. So I like a 6-inch plate because that'll generally cover everything. The problem with a 6-inch plate, or you know, any hardware, in fact, is the fact that you're detracting away from what you're looking at. Hardware becomes quite obvious. It becomes something that draws attention to, you know, to your eye, to what you're looking at. So a confluence, or a balance, I should say, between hardware that will do the job adequately, but not overwhelming the door so that you're taking away from maybe what the design would be. And I guess what I might be thinking of is perhaps a public library where you have maybe vertical grain oak doors, a common species of wood, but putting it into a vertical grain is unusual. Well, the more hardware you slap onto that door, the less you're able to really see the vertical grain, this substantial upcharge to the door itself. So be mindful. You know, a little wider plate's a good idea, but it's the balancing act of how much is too much. On that product brochure, they're also going to go over the fact that it is standard to have 4 beveled edges. That is typical. In standard nomenclature, you would call that B4E, beveled 4 edge. So all 4 sides of this will have a bevel, which means I can run my finger over that, and I won't have any possibility of damaging my finger. If that wasn't beveled, I would sure not do what I'm doing right now. So you really want to have beveled 4 edge, especially on hardware where your hands are going to touch it, your flat goods. You will commonly see a B3E if it's a kick plate, meaning that bottom edge is generally not beveled. And that would be typical to have at the bottom of a door, and I would even argue that you would very likely want to have that at the bottom of the door just to give that very bottom of the door the maximum amount of protection possible. You'll see from that catalog that you're going to get by standard number 6 by 5/8 oval head sheet metal screws, and the quantity of screws will be based on you know, how many holes. By standard, this will have holes for those oval head screws that are included. They mention available in standard finishes. Let's back up. The materials, the aluminum, brass, bronze, and stainless steel. On aluminum, you can do pretty much anything that's anodized. Clear anodized aluminum, dark bronze. They can probably do a black anodized. If not, they can do a powder coat, certainly. On your brass and bronze will be your architectural finishes, your chromes, your brasses, your bronze, satin, polished, your nickels, etc. On to stainless steel, they can give you standard Type 304 stainless, which is the run-of-the-mill stainless. They can do that in a micro shield, a coating that's applied to the plate so as to retard the growth of bacteria, hospital application. They can do that in a 316 stainless, which would be an absolute marine grade stainless, substantially more resistant to rust degradation over the lifespan of the hardware. They can also do a lifetime finish in polished brass. That would be, I don't know the base material of that. It very likely is made of brass. I don't recall what that is, but it is a polished brass that will not degrade or become less beautiful as the lacquer comes off of a typical polished brass item. The letter in the part number tells us the sizes. You can review that. We've touched on basically all the sizes except the 3x12. The 70A is not an uncommon plate either if you have a residential application or even a commercial application where you have pairs of like 2-foot French doors, 10 light doors, and those styles are quite small, like maybe 4-inch. Yeah, you're going to want a 3x12 on there most likely. They can do rounded corner where you're going to have, a radius corner, where they'll give you a small little radius. I don't know the radius. It's probably about a 1/2 inch. And then a rounded edge. That would be a radius, depending on the width of the plate. Both of those are not uncommon. You do bump into them. But the bottom line is the 70C is by far the most common plate available. Now this blue finish. This is not a blue push plate. This is a 606. That means a couple of things. That means it's made of solid brass and is in a satin brass finish. Has a clear lacquer applied to it. Okay, and that's just your protective coating, that blue paper that's there that you peel away. Okay. Now, there are certainly lots of options that can be done on this. Being a plate, Rockwood can technically make this in any size that you want. I've asked them to do that in the past, and they've obliged every time. You can do security screws, tech screws, like a self-drilling screw. They'll call it a tech screw. Torx screws or security fasteners might be appropriate for your application. I have residential clients that call up and say, yeah, I want that plate, but I don't own a drill to drill the holes. Okay, fine. How about self-adhesive? They can put self-adhesive strips on the back. No holes, obviously, in that scenario, where you will then just apply it with that self-adhesive tape. They can do engraving. They can do preparations for holes in the plate itself. Think of preparation and engraving. Let's put it all into one example. An engraved plate with a hole for a cylinder. Think we recently did some work for a state capitol building in the southwest of the United States. The building was built in about 1880. They are very restricted by what can be done from a historical perspective. There's a historical preservation council that exists. It's actually an arm of the state government, is to what I understand. Everything must go past that office. The client who is the government of this state I'm speaking of, having to work with that other office, was able to get everyone to agree to a flat plate that did say that was engraved push. They would permit that, but they were adding, or they had some old deadbolts that were extremely old, or maybe they were rim locks that could not be replaced. They did need to modernize because there was no other way to lock those bathroom doors down after hours. This part of the state capitol building permitted tours, basically 7 days a week. So we were able to get a hole drilled for the cylinder for a small format. I mean a small case, an auxiliary style mortise deadbolt. It did happen to be interchangeable core, but it wasn't small format. So Rockwood can entertain those engraving requirements, those prep options. I've also even had them make a plate with a custom size and width, and then custom function holes for everything. I was removing an outdated electronic combination lock, replacing it with a modern version of that lock. Lots of old holes had to be covered. It wasn't fire rated, so applying a plate to that was not going to be something that would disqualify the door from that use, etc. The point being, Rockwood all but entertains these custom requests for pretty much anything you can put in front of them. So be mindful of that. They're happy to oblige. Finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Rockwood products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Rockwood 70C and a 606 finish or any other Rockwood product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.